My daughter called me last spring, said she'd been talking to her brothers, said they'd all agreed, together, like a committee, that it was time for me to think about other arrangements. Those were her exact words, other arrangements. I remember sitting in my kitchen, the window open, the sound of something out on the street I couldn't identify, and I remember thinking, I have outlived my wife. I have outlived two friends I expected to bury me. I worked 40 years without missing a shift that mattered, and now my children, who I love, who I raised, have gathered somewhere I wasn't invited and decided the shape my life should take. My name is Eugene. I'm 84 years old, and I want to tell you something I wish somebody had told me when I was still young enough that it would have changed more. I was not an easy man to live with. I know that now. Lorraine knew it for most of our marriage, and she had the patience to stay anyway, or maybe just the stubbornness. Either way, I was grateful for it, even when I didn't say so. She died 11 years ago, 11 years this past February, and when she went, something shifted in me that I still don't have language for. Not just grief, something more practical than grief. An understanding that the structures I'd built my whole life around, the job, the income, the identity of provider, the usefulness of being needed, those structures were gone, and what remained was just me, standing in a kitchen that still smelled like her coffee. I thought the family would fill it. That's what you think. That's what everyone tells you. You have your children. You have your grandchildren. You won't be alone. I believed that. For a while, I held on to that the way a man holds a rope in dark water. And then I watched it happen, not suddenly, but slowly, the way a tide pulls out. Marcus, my oldest, lives 40 minutes from here. He visits when he can, which means when life permits, which means not often. He has 3 children and a job that doesn't stop at 5 o'clock, and a wife whose own parents also need things. He's not a bad son. He's a busy man. I know the difference. His sister Renee calls on Sundays, regular as a clock, 10 minutes, sometimes 15, and I can hear her doing something else in the background. She asks if I need anything. I say no. She's relieved. We say goodbye like people who've known each other a long time, but still keep a certain distance. I'm not saying any of this to wound them. I'm saying it because I think I spent too many years believing that love, when it came time, would be logistical, that the people who loved you would also be there, that presence and affection were the same thing. They are not the same thing. And once I understood that, really accepted it, not just as a bitter fact, but as a truth I could work with, I started building differently. The first pillar is your body, not your health in some broad philosophical sense, your actual body. The specific question of whether you can get yourself up in the morning without gripping something. I learned this at 71, after the health scare that didn't kill me, but changed the way I moved through rooms. I'd been ignoring signals for years, the way my left knee swelled after a long day on my feet, the shortness of breath I blamed on the stairs, the stiffness in the mornings I called just getting old, like that was an explanation instead of a warning. I ignored all of it. A man who spent 40 years doing physical work doesn't take his body seriously because the body, for most of his life, has never talked back. Then one morning I got up from a chair and sat back down involuntarily. My legs simply didn't hold. I sat there in my own living room like a man waiting for a bus, except the bus wasn't coming. I thought of a man I'd worked with, Norman, maintenance same as me. Norman was 68 when his knees started going. He stopped taking the stairs. Then he stopped walking the longer routes. Then he stopped going out mornings. Within 2 years, his son was picking up his groceries. Within 3, he'd moved out of his apartment. Not because his mind went, because his legs went. And when your legs go, your choices go with them. I didn't want Norman's life. So I started walking, every morning, even the ones where I didn't feel it, even when it was cold enough that my breath came out like smoke, and my knee ached in a way that felt like a threat. 30 minutes, sometimes 20, but every day. And I started paying attention to what I ate, not obsessively, Not like I was tracking it on some list, but the way you start paying attention when something matters. Less of the things that made me feel slow. More water. Real food made at home. I'm 84. I walked to the corner store this morning. I carried my own bag back. I came up my own stairs. That's not remarkable, but it's mine. And it means I don't have to ask. There's a dignity in that nobody talks about. The dignity of not needing to ask, of not having to wait for someone's schedule to match your hunger or your errand or your need to feel the outside air on your face. The moment you can't move yourself, you start fitting into other people's lives instead of living your own. Your body is the first pillar, and you have to work to keep it because it will not keep itself. This is going to sound ridiculous, but I spent probably 3 months convinced that a certain brand of knee brace was the solution to everything. I ordered 2 of them, wore them both at once for about a week, walked around my apartment looking like I was prepared for a minor war. Daniel downstairs saw me once in the hallway and said nothing, which with Daniel means he noticed. He definitely noticed. The braces are in a drawer somewhere now. What actually helped was the walking, the ordinary, unglamorous walking. The second pillar is needing less. And I want to be careful how I say this because it sounds like I mean poverty, like I mean denial, and that's not it. What I mean is, the man who needs less cannot be controlled. I worked my whole life for security. I believed, the way men of my generation believed, that security was accumulation. You saved, you built, you kept. The house, the car, the pension, the structure of a life that required a certain income to maintain. And then the income stopped, and the structure stayed. And I realized I'd built something that was quietly eating me. After Lorraine died, I sat with the finances, really sat with them, for the first time without her. I saw what the apartment cost, what the car cost, a car I drove maybe twice a week, what I was spending on things I bought because I'd always bought them, not because they served me anymore. I had a colleague, Marcus Webb, different Marcus, not my son, retired the same year I did with more saved than me. Good man. Worked hard his whole life. But he'd built a retirement that assumed a certain pace, a certain scale. Dinners out 3 times a week, the golf club membership, the winter trip south. Within 5 years, his savings were moving faster than he'd planned. He started asking his daughter for help. Small things at first, but asking. And every time he asked, something in him shifted. He started justifying himself to her. She started having opinions about his choices. Not meanly, she loved him. But money creates leverage whether anyone intends it or not. I sold one thing, then another. Not because I had to, but because I started asking, do I need this, or do I just need to feel like I have it? 2 different questions with very different answers. What I kept was enough. What I let go made me lighter. And the lightness was not what I expected. I thought simplifying would feel like losing. Instead, it felt like the moment you put down a bag you've been carrying so long, you forgot it was in your hand. When you need less, nobody has power over you. Not your children, not a landlord, not the creeping fear that the money will run out before you do. You stop making compromises you don't want to make. You stop smiling at things that aren't funny. That's the second pillar, and it is as much a form of strength as anything I did with my hands for 40 years. The third pillar is harder to talk about. It took me longer to understand it. It's the ability to absorb loss without disappearing. And I don't mean strength in the way men my age were taught to mean it. Teeth together, jaw set, I'm fine, don't worry about me. That's not strength. I spent decades doing that, and all it did was make me harder to love. What I mean is something quieter, the ability to keep walking after something stops, not because the grief isn't real, but because the alternative is to let the grief become your whole address. When Lorraine died, I knew 2 things simultaneously. I knew I was devastated, and I knew that if I let the devastation set the terms, if I became the man who needed his children to visit constantly, to fill the silence, to give me a reason to exist, I would never recover. Not because they wouldn't try, because no one can carry another person's emptiness. It's the one thing that can't be transferred. I had a friend, Robert. His wife passed 8 months before Lorraine. Robert and I had worked together years back, and we weren't close, but close enough to check in on each other during those months. Robert stopped. Just stopped. Stopped going to the barber he'd been going to for 30 years. Stopped taking his evening walks. Stopped calling anyone who hadn't called him first. He sat in his apartment and waited for his grief to be handled by people who loved him. They tried. His daughters visited more. His son flew in twice in 1 year. But the visits didn't fix it, because visits can't fix it. By the time I last saw Robert, 5 years after his wife died, he had grown smaller in a way that had nothing to do with age. He'd become a man who was waiting to be taken care of, and the waiting had taken something essential out of him. I grieved Lorraine for a long time. I still grieve her. Not every day, not with the same weight, but she's there. But I kept my mornings. I kept my routines. When the silence in the apartment got loud, I went out. Not to escape it, just to stay in motion, because I knew that motion was the only thing that would carry me forward. Resilience, and I almost never use that word because it gets used carelessly, resilience, the real kind, is not the absence of being hit. It's not pretending you weren't. It's the decision to get back up, imperfectly, slowly, without an audience, and keep building a life that belongs to you. Because if you can't do that, if you need other people to lift you every time the ground shifts, you will become a weight they carry. And they will carry it out of love, genuinely. But love bent under weight eventually changes shape. I have watched that happen. I did not want it to happen to my children and me. The fourth pillar is the one nobody talks about directly, and it's the most important. Knowing what you will and will not accept, and holding that line without apology. This is what my daughter didn't expect when she called last spring with her committee's decision about my other arrangements. She expected, I think, what a lot of adult children expect, that age makes a person pliable, that the accumulated years make you grateful enough, or tired enough, or uncertain enough of your own worth, that you'll accept whatever shape other people try to put you in, because at least it means someone's paying attention. She was wrong about me, not because I'm stubborn, because I know who I am. I sat at my kitchen table. I let her finish. Then I said, I hear you. I know you're coming from love. And while I can get myself up in the morning, make my own meals, walk to my own appointments, and pay my own bills, I'm staying in my own home. When that changes, I'll tell you. But that time isn't now. She pushed. She brought up the fall risk. She brought up the stairs. She brought up the neighbors who'd noticed I was sometimes slow. I let her push. And then I said it again, the same words, the same tone. She went quiet for a moment, and then she said, Dad, we just worry. I said, I know. I'd worry about you too. And that was the end of it, for now. I want to be honest with you. I understand my children. I raised them. I know where their worry comes from, and I know it's real. Naomi, my youngest, she's the one who names things out loud, who says what the others are circling. She called the week after and said, Pop, nobody's trying to take anything from you. And I believed her. I believe all of them love me. But love and authority are different things, and I have spent my life learning that distinction. A man I knew, 68, 69 when this started, let his family make one small decision, then another. They meant well. They always mean well. First it was the car, then it was the neighborhood, then it was the building, then it was the floor plan. By 73, he lived in a room his children had chosen, in a city that wasn't his, surrounded by furniture that wasn't his, waiting for visits from people who had, entirely out of love, erased him. He wasn't mistreated, he was managed. And the difference between those two things, I cannot tell you how thin that line is, or how quickly you cross it once you stop knowing what you stand for. I am not a soft man. I am not a hard man either. I am what was left after life did what it does. And what was left knows, specifically, what matters to me. My apartment, my mornings, my walk to the corner, the quiet of my own table when the coffee is hot and nobody needs anything from me yet. Those things are not negotiable. And because I know they're not negotiable, nobody can take them. That is the fourth pillar, knowing what you won't give up. Not angrily, not dramatically, just clearly, the way you know your own name. I want to be honest about something else, because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort. I am not saying your family doesn't love you. Renee loves me. Marcus loves me. All 6 of my children love me, in their specific, imperfect ways. What I'm saying is that love, warm, genuine, well-intentioned love, cannot substitute for the structures you build yourself. It was never meant to. Love is not load-bearing in that way. When I leaned on it as if it were, when I expected it to hold the weight of my independence and my dignity and my daily peace, it bent. And then I felt resentful, and the people I loved felt inadequate, and everyone lost. I had to build 4 things that held, regardless of who called and who visited and who remembered and who forgot. My body, still moving. The simplicity of needing less. The resilience to absorb loss without becoming only loss. And the knowledge of who I am, held steady against anyone's well-meaning revision. I think about my father sometimes, Samuel Johnson. He never said much, and when he did, it was short. Stand up straight, keep your word, don't let them see you break. He was a man shaped by a time that didn't leave room for much else, and I became in many ways a version of him. Quieter than I needed to be, stronger on the outside than I had any right to be. I carried things for decades that I should have put down or at least named, but here's what I think my father was actually trying to give me, underneath the firmness and the silence and the expectation. He was trying to give me the ability to stand on my own. He just didn't have the words to explain why it mattered. Or maybe he thought I'd figure it out. Maybe he figured I'd have to. I did. I just figured it out later than I would have liked. I'm 84 years old. I have been awake for approximately 30,000 mornings. Some of them were worth more than I knew at the time. Some of them I spent being upset about things I cannot now remember. Lorraine is gone. My parents are gone. A few of the men I respected most are gone. And I am still here, at my own table, with my window open, coffee going cold because I keep forgetting to drink it before I start talking. That's something. That's more than something. I don't know how many mornings are left. I stopped trying to calculate it because the calculation doesn't change what I do with today. What I know is that I want to meet whatever is left standing up. Not because I'm trying to prove anything to anyone, I'm past that, but because the only thing that belongs entirely to me is how I carry myself through whatever comes next. These 4 things, the body you keep moving, the life you simplify until it can hold you lightly, the resilience you practice until loss doesn't finish you, the self you know clearly enough to defend, nobody builds them for you. And nobody can take them away once they're yours. That's the only inheritance worth leaving, too. Not the money, not the house, not the things. The proof that a person can age without disappearing. Thank you for sitting with me a while. I don't take that for granted. If something here stayed with you, I'd like to know. Leave it in the comments. I read them. Not all at once. I'm slow, but I read them. And if you want to come back and sit again sometime, the subscribe button is right there. I'm not going anywhere, at least not yet. Take care of yourself. That's not a small thing.